Tom, tough act to follow, man. You up for the task this morning?
That'd be a negative. I'm still just kind of waking up.
So Tom obviously joins us every Monday at 7:20. Tom, I'll start you off with the softball. Just the defensive performance that you saw on Saturday. When's the last time that this Arkansas defense has put together something like that?
Well, that's really tough to quantify because, they gave up 442 yards. But when you are outgained by 50 yards and you win the game by 12 points and could have scored another touchdown at the end, that means you were just tougher. You won the turnover battle. You won big plays, stopped them twice inside the 1 yard line. It was just amazing. You don't do that by fluke. You do that by your run blitzes, getting great penetration on the second one. And on the first one, they were running this jet sweep action, and the guy who was running it kind of bumped into Matt Corral. There was a bad mesh, and they lost the ball. Well, it's because Elijah Moore is the guy who's supposed to be running that play. Why was Elijah Moore not in there running that play? Because Jalen Catalon crushed him a few plays earlier, and he had to go out for a while because he hit him so hard. And so, wrong personnel for Ole Miss, and Catalon winds up recovering the fumble on the 5 yard line. You can go through and find, as I wrote in my story on Sunday, heroes across the board on defense. Julius Coates with his first sack of the year. Grant Morgan with 19 tackles and the INT return that iced the game when they had to have it. Just really well schemed, well scouted, and well repped and well schemed, and they deserve that win. That's unbelievable.
Tom, when you look at this football team, their performance through 4 games, I know Brett McMurphy had them at 22 on his AP Top 25. Did you rank Arkansas this week?
Oh, Ty, you didn't look. Okay,
I've not looked. I stayed away because I wanted to hear the genuine response. I have not looked at your article yet or your ranking.
I didn't. Certainly, I considered Arkansas for the top 25, but you can't go back and reverse the outcome at Auburn as much as I'd like for them to be able to do that. If they were 3-1, I think they'd be in the team. I think they'd be about where Auburn was, before they started losing, somewhere around 13-14. If they had won the Auburn game, and they deserved it. So I think if they go down, A&M is number 7 right now. If they go down there and beat Texas A&M, there's no question Arkansas will be in the polls. But here's what Razorback fans have to take heart in. The team goes out and competes, even when Ole Miss has got maybe a more explosive offense. And Ole Miss played a much better defensive game than I would ever have thought. I thought Arkansas would establish the run, that Rakeem Boyd would finally get on the loose. They still have not had a lot of breakaway running plays yet this season, which is just so odd to think that how good they are right now, and they still haven't really established their run game. So I think they've got a ways to go. When you see them every week, you see some of their flaws. And, yeah, I had teams like Auburn and Oklahoma down there at the very bottom of my 25, and Arkansas, I believe, is right in there with them.
Yeah. Tom Murphy with us here on the Morning Rush. We talk all the time about defenses having enough tape to figure out offenses in this league and around college football. Will there come a point, is there any concern from you that offensive coordinators will re-engineer and figure out ways to beat this Arkansas defense and figure out what the pressure points and the weaknesses are? Because right now they are confusing opponents and confusing quarterbacks tremendously game in, game out.
Well, that's what Lane Kiffin was talking about after the game. So what we know is, maybe from advanced scouting from their analysts and then straight into the cut-ups for the defensive staff, they're studying their rears off in terms of tendencies in alignments, formations, down and distances, personnel groupings, and all that kind of stuff, and what type of route combinations come from those. And they were ready. So the things that Ole Miss did against Alabama, the schemes, they knew what to do when reading stuff pre-snap, and this guy goes in motion. They knew what to do. And I don't know how often Alabama played man against Ole Miss, but those guys in LSU, it's kind of the macho thing to do, to play more man defense. And I guess there's some other advantages you can get from it. You can send pressure in disguised type ways when you do that. But anyway, Arkansas is playing in the zone, allows their defensive backs to play with their eyes and their linebackers, and that's how they got so many of their picks. And Matt Corral was staring some of his receivers down. So that's what Lane Kiffin talked about, how when you get schemed up like that, the offense has got to find ways to adjust. So that means you've got to have some different concepts to throw at Arkansas. And I think that's why Georgia had a fairly successful second half. Stetson Bennett came in and kind of threw off. And also it was a game where there wasn't a whole lot of advanced prep on what DeJuan Mathis would look like or what Stetson Bennett would look like. But you've got to tip your cap. All of college football right now is paying attention to the way Arkansas is scheming defensively.
Yeah, and with Arkansas rushing 3, dropping 8, the 3 guys up front, led by Jonathan Marshall, don't get enough credit for what they're doing to make all of this work. Marshall ends up with 5 tackles on the chart for Saturday, but really what those guys up front are doing to make all of that work for the 8 guys in coverage is really probably not getting enough note.
I agree with that, because the interceptions are the sexy part of all that. But Jonathan Marshall clearly forced the deep throw interception in the second quarter against the Wind. I think it might have been Corral's first pass against the Wind, and it kind of got hung up. Well, Jonathan Marshall was bearing down on him, and they moved Corral around in the pocket. They sacked him a couple of times when they brought the blitz pressure. Morgan got him once. Mm-hmm. Julius Coates fought through a double team, and so he wasn't super comfortable. Now, I know there were several plays where the 3 guys just got stonewalled, and Corral had a lot of time, but they moved him some. They made him uncomfortable some. And, I would say that they probably drew a couple of holding calls, but, the same holds true for the other side. Not a lot of holding calls being called right now in the SEC. But I agree with you. I think Gregory and Coates and Jonathan Marshall and Isaiah Nichols, Xavier Kelly, those guys are doing a good job of just rotating in and just keeping the pressure on.
Tom Murphy with us here on the Morning Rush. Tom, we haven't mentioned Hudson Clark's name yet. He has 3 interceptions against the Ole Miss Rebels. Pro Football Focus just listed him as their defensive player of the week. This is a guy who both his parents went to the University of Arkansas. I want to say his grandfather did as well, so he's a legacy, a walk-on out of Highland Park. I mean, where did this kid come from, man? It is unbelievable what he's done so far this season. He's the 5th rated corner in college football as far as his position graded out. Unbelievable performance so far.
Really stunning story. I mean, clearly he's got some athletic genes about him and just great football instincts. Came from the football factory down there at Highland Park, full of confidence. And when it came to the point in the Mississippi State game where he had to go in, you as a media member who hasn't seen him. Now, we've heard some things in practice that he's playing well. Okay. Well, how does that translate to game days? He's a walk-on redshirt freshman. You think, okay, they're going to pick on him. Well, when you're in the zone, it's harder to, quote, pick on a guy. He gave up a couple of plays in the Auburn game. But here he is, jumping routes. I mean, he knows basically what's coming. He's reading Corral's eyes. He's getting a jump on the ball. Ole Miss's receivers weren't going back for the ball. He jumps over Dontario Drummond for one of them. It just wins jump ball. And it's just a product of having confidence in yourself and the scheme and studying what's going to happen and then making the athletic play, the classic making a break on the ball. And you got to feel good for him. He's one of many, many great stories going on with this Razorback defense.
Tom, you bring up something else I wanted to talk about, the preparation, what these guys know, what Jashad Stewart, what Hudson Clark, what Grant Morgan, what so many of these players have echoed time and time again after their defensive performances. We know what's coming. I mean, like with Odom, Rhodes, Carter, and LeBlanc, when you hear that, you're just like, how much time and preparation do these defensive coaches spend if their players are so ready for what they're facing every Saturday?
Well, they're doing the overtime. They're studying the film after practices and stuff, and the coaches are doing a good job of imparting the defensive plan to them, and they're confident. You can just hear it in the videos they release, how confident the coaches are in their players. Now, I will say this. A&M's got 2 weeks. Jimbo Fisher and those guys need to know they've got to come up with some different twists off the concepts they're running, because Arkansas will have schemed up everything they've put on film so far. So this is going to be a really good matchup. I think the Arkansas offense has so much more room for improvement at this point. They hit some big plays. Having Traylon Burks as a spark was really big for them. But they've got to get guys like Trey Knox going. They've got to get Rakeem Boyd. They've got to get some seams for him to get into the second level, because I'm not sure how – he might not have had but 1 or 2 runs this season where he's been to the second level, and that's usually going laterally. So they got a ways to go. I will say this, y'all. We haven't talked about 3 penalties, 15 yards. That's just a sign of a team that's just well drilled and doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. And I hate to come in and be dad and remind everybody of curfew here as the party's getting going. But let me say this. This is the week. I know it's a bye week. Everybody wants to scatter traditionally on bye week, go home. But, Tom, you've got to kind of stick to your knitting on what you've done with coronavirus and your protocols, because if you don't do that this week on the bye week, then you come back and your testing doesn't go well next week, you won't have everybody for A&M. So even though it's a bye week this week, it's very important this team sticks to their knitting on what they've been doing to more or less stay intact as much as they've been able to, or next week won't be well when they start testing again.
Oh, yeah,
and they'll be testing this week, but when they test next week, it's very important what they do this week.
No question. They will get reminders. Of course, they're practicing this week. I do not know what the coaching staff will let them do on the weekend in terms of, let them go home for the weekend. I don't know. Yeah. I would assume that they would stay around campus, stay in their, quote, bubble. And they've got good things going on, man. Yeah. They're playing well. The state is really rallying around them. You got guys like Eddie who are just fired up. And that's going on in every corner of the state right now. So
normally bye week,
very, very important.
Normally bye weeks mean going home and doing other things, and I don't know that you can do that this year.
No, in fact, the players probably understand that and realize it themselves, and need to stay amongst themselves this weekend, because that A&M game looms really big. I have no doubt that they can be in the game. They're going to have to do some good scheming and be better offensively.
Tom,
I'll say it now. Saturday practice. That's what they need. They need a Saturday practice.
Yeah, they're going to have to back off their hitting, because I think a lot of their injuries have come in some of the hitting they've done during the week, and we don't see it. And then a guy like Deion Edwards shows up on game day, and he's not dressed out. But the linebackers are really dinged up. Those guys don't need to be hitting. Sam said that he thought Bumper Poole would be back in 2 weeks. Dorian Gerald could be back, which would be a huge bonus for that D-line. Obviously, Rakeem Boyd will be feeling better. Busta Brown could be back at cornerback, which creates an interesting scenario. Hudson Clark he's earned it, deserves playing time. So that means you're rotating Brown and Jerry Jacobs, Hudson Clark, Kari Johnson. It's unbelievable that the previous coaching staff, it seemed to me, found ways that guy's not ready to play. I've got to leave my starters in, and guys would wear out in the fourth quarter. This coaching staff is finding ways to get guys on the field, and it's a remarkable difference.
Tom, appreciate your time as always, bud. We'll talk on Thursday.
You betcha. Sounds good.